All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all joining us on your evening here. Welcome to the Scott Ranch Community Meeting. Thank you for joining us. My name is Austin McNerney, and I'm a facilitator that has been retained to help structure and guide this evening's community meeting. I appreciate everyone's interest in the proposed project and want to orient attendees on how we will interact over the computer. I appreciate that, we're pretty getting Zoom fatigue, but that's where we're at right now, and we're going to use this tool to its most effective to help us through tonight's meeting. So first of all, to orient you to the Zoom controls to make sure everyone's getting the most out of the interaction, I want to point out a couple features. First of all, you'll see on your screen, there's a few items: chat, Q&A, and then more. The more is available to you if you want to change your audio setting or minimize your screen size. The Q&A is available to you to add, view, and identify questions which you feel are of great importance. You can add at any time during tonight's presentation a question in that box, type it in your own words, and all the panelists will see it. You'll be able to see the other questions that are coming in. And if you like a question, instead of retyping it yourself, you can actually upvote it, it's called, or click on that question. And the questions that get more votes will rise to the top, and the panelists will see that that's a question of great importance to the audience, and we'll be able to address them. So please, at any time as we go through the presentations you're about to see, feel free to enter questions in there. You also have a chat function. You can use that to send a note to the panelist or one of the other attendees that's on this meeting. But note that we are asking that questions go into the question section, because that's where we'll be focusing most of our eyes. I'll be looking into the chat to see if there's any issues or questions that anyone's having or any technical difficulties. That is the format for interacting tonight, and we appreciate you working with us to make this work. So let's hear about what's going to happen tonight. After my review of the agenda, we will turn to an overview of the proposed project by Greg Colvin from the Kelly Creek Protection Project. Then Steve Abbs from Davidon Homes will present the proposed housing plan. We will then turn to Maggie Jensen, the project's landscape architect, and she will discuss the park plan. And last, Peter Cohn from the Kelly Creek Protection Project will close with a description of the project benefits. Following the presentations, we'll spend the remainder of our time together until 7 p.m. addressing as many of the questions as we have time for and that you've put in there. We know that we might not get through all the questions in the time allotted, and we apologize. We'll do our best with the panelists. But if there are questions that aren't addressed tonight, I encourage you to look to the project website, and we'll provide those links at the end of the presentation, where they will be updating some of the material there based on questions that come in tonight. And as I said, we'll share those resources for additional information. So I ask for your help in making this process go smoothly, and to listen to the presentation and to raise questions that focus on the content or clarify items that you've heard, and really help bring some clarity on what is proposed here. So that would be really thankful of your respect of everyone here, and use the chat and Q&A in a respectful way to get your questions and information needs before the panelists. Lastly, before we turn into the presentations, I want to identify that there are a couple individuals here that are available. They're not on the panel, but they may chime in if needed when we get to the Q&As. And that's Olivia Irvin with the City of Petaluma, who's the principal environmental planner, who's overseeing the Scott Ranch project. And she'll be listening in and can speak up if necessary. We also have Bert Whitaker, who's the director of Sonoma County Regional Parks, with us, and appreciate both of them taking time to be with us. So before we turn to the actual presentations, we have a couple questions to ask of you all, and we'd ask for your help in responding to these questions. which I'm going to launch right now. And if you could please take a couple seconds and respond, we'll see the results. All right, you should be seeing that the results from this poll. So it looks that about 47% of you are within 1 mile of the project site, 16% adjacent to the site, and 37% a little over a mile from the site. And an overwhelming majority, 95% of the attendees here tonight visit Putnam Park. So thank you for that. And we will move on, and I'm going to turn it now to our next slide. So give us 1 second. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Hello there, I'm Greg Colvin. I'm the director of the Kelly Creek Protection Project. I have one more thing to add to what Austin said before we begin. This is not an official, what you might call a CEQA meeting. The CEQA is the state law that governs environmental impact reports. If there are those among you who want to make comments, there is a facility to do that through the city website, and your emails and written comments can be received in that way. So let me begin just by saying, personally, I became involved with this whole issue because I live 3 blocks from Scott Ranch. I have since 1992, and I'm a retired nonprofit lawyer, now serving as volunteer director of the Kelly Creek Protection Project. This map that you see is a way to orient everyone, whether you're new or longtime resident of Petaluma, whether you live on the east side or the west side, to the main features surrounding the Scott Ranch. And Austin will use his cursor there to help point out what I'm mentioning. First of all, the red barns. As you go out D Street toward Point Reyes, you'll see this is the smallest of the red barns. That is the heart of the Scott Ranch. The Scott Ranch was purchased by Davidon Homes in 2003, and so it's also referred to as the Davidon property. Kelly Creek, there's 2 tributaries, one that runs along D Street, another one that runs up through the middle of the ranch. They come together behind the barns and then run down into the neighborhoods of West Petaluma and into the Petaluma River. You'll also see, if you look to the west, to the left, that we have a long road here called Windsor Drive, around which there are a number of fairly densely placed existing residential homes. Between Victoria and West Haven, which is up in the northwest corner, there are almost 300 homes existing already in this valley. And actually, if the Davidon homes were added, that would be less than 10% of the existing homes that are already arrayed through Victoria and West Haven along Windsor. So most importantly, we want you to make sure you can get a clear view. Since 95% of you have visited Putnam Park, where that is, there are 2 trails and entrances. They're informal right now. They don't have parking lots. One is off of Oxford Court, and the other one is called the West Wind Trail. It's near the roundabout below West Haven. So with that, what I'd like to do is give it back to Austin, who has a 9-minute video. We recently, just 2 weeks ago, recorded a virtual tour during the time of COVID. We know we can't have a large gathering and show people the features of the ranch and the residential and park amenities, but maybe with this 9-minute video, you'll get a sense of what it's like on a very nice day.
And if you would turn the volume up on your computer or device that you're listening, it may help in listening to this.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Scott Ranch. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and I want to introduce myself. My name is Greg Colvin. I've lived in Petaluma since 1988, and for the last 17 years I've been working to try to come up with the best solution for how this beautiful piece of land on the west side of Petaluma could be maximized for public access and open space, protection of endangered species, and really an extension of Putnam Park. And that's really what makes it important that we're taking you on this COVID-safe virtual tour of Scott Ranch today. Because within 5 weeks, the City Council is going to make a major decision about the future of this land by reviewing the environmental impact report that's been prepared by the city. I think we're ready. I think we'll just go on the tour, and a lot of things will be pointed out that will, I'm sure, answer questions you have about what this is going to look like once it's developed as a park. Clusters of 18 homes on one side of the road and 10 homes on the other. So come along with us.
Okay, so real quick, guys, before we walk, I just want to kind of get you a lay of the land here. We're at the barn complex right in here. So basically the 44 acres that will be Kelly Creek Protection Project property, dedicated and expanded to the Putnam Park, is basically all this land you see in here. We're going to walk up to where the homes are at and where the streets will be, and show you how far things have set back from the creek, how things are set back from the street. But there's been a lot of changes here that not only to the density of the project, reducing the homes from originally 93 homes to 66 and 63 homes, now to 28 homes, which is the absolute minimum allowable number of homes on the property. Only 9.5 acres of the entire 59-acre project will be developed. So that's only 16% of the property will be developed, and the remaining 84% will remain as permanent open space, with 44 acres of permanent public accessible park with the expansion of the Putnam Park.
This is a small hay barn. It's lifted up off the ground, and it is sort of secondary to the big red barn over here, which is the major cattle barn. And I'd like to take you briefly inside, because this is a 100-year-old relic that still has inside of it the wooden equipment used to milk dairy cows. And it'll become a museum, essentially, when and if this becomes part of Putnam Park, where people of all ages, students, those from Petaluma, and visitors to town will be able to see what the whole dairy industry of Petaluma really started like. So this is the big, inside of the big 2-story barn, red barn, the major icon that you see when you travel up and out D Street. It is set up as a milking parlor. And if you see these slats over here, wooden slats, the way the milking was done was to bring the cows in, put their heads in the middle, a row of cows on this side, a row of cows on that side, close the bracket, bring the hay down from the hayloft so that they can be fed, and then have the crew of milkers behind them getting the milk from the cows. So if this is a family grouping of barns, this would be the smallest child. This house was needed in order to wash the dairy equipment. It's very important when you're milking into pails and so on, and even today, you need to have a steady flow of water, which they had a well that served this building, to be able to, every time they milk cows, to wash all the equipment and keep it as healthy as possible for the next round of milking, usually twice a day. What I'd like to do next is to take you up through the main pasture. Steve can show you where the homes will be built, then we'll cross over the middle of the creek and come back on the other side behind the barns, where you see the 2 tributaries of Kelly Creek. There's actually 2 that come together right behind the barn.
So folks, as we walk along here, I just want to kind of get you the lay of the land. If you look at your map, on the 10 houses on the north side, lot 10, which is the furthest house to the east, will be located right about, you can see up on the hill, there's kind of an orange tree on the other side of the fence. That's about the extent of how far east the homes will be. So basically everything to the right of that will all remain as a permanent open space with this project. It'll be a privately maintained, owned and maintained property by the homeowners association, but forever will be stripped of any ability to build any homes on there. So
where we're standing right now will be the upper parking lot for the Kelly Creek extension of Putnam Park. And this stake back here shows where the road will be coming in that will serve that parking lot with 10 spaces, and also serve, Steve, right, the houses that will be on the upper part of this hillside behind us.
And then looking that way, you can see the orange stakes that we've put in the ground. And what that is, that's the rear fences of the homes that will be backing to the creek. So that first stake that you see there is the front side corner, I guess, of lot 28, where it connects to the street. And the one further back is the back corner of lot 28. And then we got more stakes that wrap around the corner there. In negotiations with Greg and working on this land plan, the previous iteration had homes 50 feet closer to the creek. So the homes are now set back at a minimum of 119 feet from the center line of the creek to the fence lines, where before it was 62 feet.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has marked this area, the creek and everything to the south, as habitat for the frog. And the frog lives in the creek, it lives in this gully over here, and also the stock pond up above, which we'll go to. The public, when the extension of the park is open and trails are put in, will be able to walk here, but will not be able to walk up into that area, because we really do want to protect it for the frog and for nature only.
So we do have plans to restore this gully. We'd keep cattle out of it while all the plants are growing, sedges, rushes, willow. So once we help restore the gully, we keep sediment loads out of the creek, and another benefit of it is the groundwater table gets a little bit closer to the surface, which helps with all the flora, and the cows will like it too, because the grass will be better to eat. So there's a lot of benefits to restoring the gully.
With respect to the outdoor environment, as we had started, it creates a healthy opportunity for all the people of our community to have an outdoor activity, particularly at this time where our community and other communities in the state are shut down. Opening up Putnam Park to the entire city creates a very healthy outdoor opportunity that heretofore doesn't exist.
Well, hello again, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of Scott Ranch and learned something not only about how we're going to extend Putnam Park, but where the Davidon houses will go. Also, if you want to keep in touch with what's going on, we have a website. It's called extendputnampark.org. So with that, I'd like to say goodbye. We shall see each other at meetings in the neighborhood and on the trails. Goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching that. And we're going to just switch over to a couple other slides and let Greg talk through a couple items here. So give us 1 second as I make the switch. All right, Greg, and it's all you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Austin. I want to bring you up to date with some information that covers, well, not just the last 17 years since this has been an issue for our city and our neighborhood, but more than 150 years, going back to 1868. The Weiss and Peterson families established one of the first dairy farms here at what we now know as the Scott Ranch in the whole Petaluma area. In 1915, the ranch was sold to Neil Scott, who remodeled every building and fence, just as they are now 100 years later. Neil Scott died and the ranch went to his son, Arnold Scott. And also during that time, between 1941 and 1999, in the 1980s, the City Council of Petaluma basically opened this valley along Windsor between D Street and Western to development. And that's where I bought my house, and so did 300 of my neighbors. And there was discussed a limit back in 1986 of 340 new homes, but that limit never became established into an ordinance. In 1999, Arnold Scott died. He left his ranch to the University of the Pacific. He didn't have children. It was his alma mater. They had given him a football scholarship. He was injured. He couldn't finish playing, but he did get a full ride for the 4 years. And he was so grateful that he left this ranch to the University of the Pacific, knowing that it was valuable because it was zoned for residential development. And then 4 years later, the University of Pacific sold this ranch to Davidon Homes for $7.8 million. And that's how we got started. Next slide, please. So during the last 13 years, there have been a number of challenges to the Davidon plans and to the draft EIRs. Go back one, please, Austin. There we are. Yep. The second slide after that, please. Thank you. Yes. So in 2004, there was a public meeting at the Women's Building. I think some of you listening in may have been there. The chocolate chip cookies were great, but the plan to build 93 homes was not great. Petaluma's responsible planning was formed around that time to educate the community, minimize development, and maximize preservation of the land. In 2008, the City Council once again looked at the general plan for 2025. We asked for a limit on the homes, but the city kept the R1 residential designation for the Scott Ranch land. In 2013, the city prepared a draft EIR on the 93 unit proposal. There was major opposition. There were 300 comment letters, and based on the community input, Davidon offered an alternative of 66 homes. It did take another 4 years for that to cycle through and come back to the Planning Commission and the City Council. And in 2017, the city looked at the revised draft for 66 or 63 homes and also alternatives for 47 or 28. In the course of this, the Planning Commission recommended that there be no homes built south of Kelly Creek in the frog habitat. The City Council at that point found, as a unanimous vote, found the EIR inadequate. They sent it back, asked for the evaluation of the 28 home environmentally preferred alternative, and the council members encouraged negotiations between the community and Davidon. All right, next slide, Austin. So we also have a bit of history on the negotiations to buy the Davidon property. There were some early talks with Petaluma's responsible planning and Davidon, which ended without success in 2013. 2016, Peter Cohn and I formed the Kelly Creek Protection Project within Earth Island Institute in order to be able to raise tax deductible funds and restart negotiations with enough money to consider buying out as much of the property as we could. And then in 2017, before the City Council review on the EIR, we announced that we had accumulated $4 million in nonprofit grant funds available toward a buyout. So we restarted negotiations at the beginning together with PetRP. PetRP decided not to continue in those talks. So we continued bringing multiple community concerns to Davidon. We conducted the negotiations privately between attorneys for 6 months and ended up with a signed binding purchase and sale agreement with two options. $11 million for a full buyout, in which case it would be all an extension of Putnam Park and no homes, and $4.1 million for 3/4 of the ranch, the heart of the Scott Ranch, with a limit of 28 homes to be built. And that fundraising deadline we were able to meet. And so we were able then to put the $4 million into escrow. I think at this point, I just wanted to, I was fortunate to have a guest editorial published in the Argus Courier this morning, and I just wanted to restate something I very strongly believe from what I said in that editorial. Um, in a perfect world, we would have liked the entire ranch to become part of Putnam Park with no houses. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we were only able to raise a portion of the full buyout price. And in a way, I think the community voted with their wallets. They supported the $4.1 million buyout, but the cost of preventing any further houses being built, even the mid-sized, low-profile houses that Davidon is proposing to build, was just it was too much to be able to reach that $11 million buyout price just to keep houses from being built next to the existing Victoria neighborhood. In the next two slides, which we may look at later on as questions come up, I had a question from one of my neighbors. What could be lost if we don't somehow go through and achieve all that we're trying to do with this project? And so I have a list which we can return to at some point later. Look at the slides of what some of those benefits are that that are at stake as we consider the future of this land and the future of what we've done to organize what we figure to be the best use of it for the benefit of the public. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve at Davidon Homes, who will give you a good sense of what the plans are to build those 28 homes. Steve?
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Abbs with Davidon Homes, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you all for logging in and to learn a little bit more about the Scott Ranch proposal. Quite a bit's changed since you last seen it back in 2017. So I'm going to kind of focus and supplement kind of the history of what Greg went over with a little more visuals, but kind of talk about how this project has really evolved over the last 18 years, and then really focus on the changes that have occurred just over the past few years since 2017, since you saw it, and since our negotiations with Greg and Kelly Creek Protection Project. So, there we go. So Davidon Homes bought the property back in 2003. There's two parcels on the property. There's a parcel north of Windsor Drive at 6.6 acres, and then south of Windsor Drive is 52.1 acres. Both of those parcels are zoned identically, and they have the same general plan land use designation. The zone is R1 residential, and the general plan density is very low density. The 0.6 to 2.5 units per acre is allowed. So what that means as far as the number of homes on Scott Ranch with some additional calculations, it means that there's a minimum of 28 homes allowable on the site, up to a maximum of 110 homes. So the city has mandated that a minimum of 28 homes be put on the Scott Ranch property. That's what our current application is. It's for 28 single family homes, only on 9.5 acres. That's only 16% of the property. The remaining 84% of the property will be permanent open space, preserved in perpetuity. And with the Helen Putnam Park extension, the 44 acres will become publicly accessible permanent open space. So this is what the 93 lot application looked back in 2004. A lot of homes. Obviously, it's less than the 110 maximum, but obviously much more than the 28. After this application was deemed complete, we started receiving comments from the community. We reached out to the resource agencies. The urban limit line got implemented, and so the homes south of the creek really reduced significantly. And we revised the plan in 2009 to a 66 lot plan. And there was a 63 lot plan alternative that kept the red barns in place. But for tonight's purposes, we'll compare everything to the 66 lot plan. So this is basically the plan that that has been in front of the city since 2009 all the way up to 2017. This is what the community commented on at the hearings in 2017. So we've heard the many comments and concerns that the community raised at that time. We've listened to the planning commissioners, we've listened to the city council members, and I think basically have implemented many, if not all, the concerns that have been raised back then with our negotiations with Greg. We immediately started our conversations with Kelly Creek Protection Project after those hearings. And Greg's main goal was, hey, let's reduce the environmental impacts to the extent feasible, and then also get the density down to the absolute minimum. So what we did first off was we removed these two clusters of homes south of Windsor Drive. Those got axed immediately. And then this is a comparison. I've got the 66 lot plan up above and the 28 lot plan below. So the next thing is the homes north of Windsor. We changed it from 16 homes with a double loaded street to only 10 homes north of Windsor Drive. Over on this northwest corner, it converted 23 homes to 18 homes. And you can see the difference. We had double loaded streets with homes back into Oxford Court, homes back into Kelly Creek. Those have been eliminated with open space parcels. So this is the 28 lot plan that we came up with. 25% of the property is considered the residential application by Davidon Homes, and then the remaining 75% is the application by KCPP for the park extension. We part of the residential application, we're also proposing a roundabout at Windsor and D Street. This is an improvement that's not required. It's not a mitigation measure of the project. It's a public benefit we're offering, but it will significantly improve not only the traffic flow, but the safety at that intersection. So back to the comparison between the two. In addition to the density reduction, we also made some additional changes. One being we reduced the house size. Before we had an average of 4,000 square foot houses. We reduced that down to an average of less than 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet on the original, below 3,000 square feet on the new proposal. In addition, we had no single story homes on the previous plan. Now we have 75% of the homes will be single story. So we not only reduce the footprint of the homes, we also reduce the verticality of the homes, which really reduces the overall visual impact of the project. Then also, I think, and more importantly, we implemented a lot of permanent open space in and around the residential project. So you can see the difference between the two. There's now a huge buffer between D Street here, where before there was homes almost extending to D Street. Also, you can see along here on, there was an existing fence line. Well, we had the proposed fence line all the way down to the street level with the 66 lot plan, and the same with these lots. These two-story homes were downsplit homes. They were basically hovering over Windsor Drive. And then as you drove down Windsor Drive, you would be just inundated with these massive homes looming over Windsor Drive. That's all changed. We have a massive setback from Windsor Drive now with a landscaped slope with the fence at the top of the hill, a significant setback from the Windsor Drive. We also implemented a open space area between the neighbors to the north. And we also have an open space area to the Oxford Court neighbors. You can see that we had homes there before. We put an open space area in between the homes, so that also allows the trees to be permanently maintained and eventually grow and really create a softer viewscape of the homes. And then finally, we increased the creek setback by an additional 40 to 50 feet. And you can see the difference here. We're adding a lot of trees and just really creating a nice setback from the creek. Also, one of the things that Greg really wanted to implement was making sure that the wildlife corridors were maintained. So we have the ability for the wildlife to continue. There's gaps in the fence, so the wildlife can continue to wander the property. So now what I want to do is I want to walk you through a three-dimensional look at basically all those changes. So I've got this three-dimensional animation that basically shows the 66 lot application on the left to the 28 lot current application on the right. So as we approach Windsor Drive, there's obviously the new roundabout there. We didn't have it before. You can see the barn structures, and then everything on the left as we turn, that's all open space versus the homes you'll see on the left previous application. Also, as you turn the corner here, you can see the homes on the left on the 66 lot plan. Immediately you're being inundated by these massive downsplit homes. Again, notice the rear yard fences were following the back, or basically the roadway, versus the big open space parcel now along Windsor Drive. So again, this is all going to remain permanent open space. The fence line is way at the top here on the right. And really with the setback of the homes will be so far back, you might be able to see only maybe the roof lines. As you drive along Windsor, we're going to have some park benches that'll be able to overlook the park. But you can see as we stop right here, the difference on the left, the 66 lot plan basically was a wall of homes as you approached that northwest cluster versus what you see out here on the right with all the single story implementation and the landscape buffers. It really softened up the viewscape. There's a roundabout that we did eliminate, but again, as you approach Windsor Drive here, you can see the landscape buffer between the fence line and the street versus the rear yards coming completely down to the street there. So real quick, you can see the homes that, this is Oxford Court up here. The homes that were backing into it have been eliminated. All these upper homes are all single story homes, again, to really reduce that view shed impact. And we're going to pan out to the entire project here. And you'll start seeing the two clusters of homes that were eliminated. Now they're completely gone. Also notice the double loaded street here versus what we're proposing now. So this is going to be flying from Helen Putnam west now. Notice that there's a trail on both sides of the creek. Before there was only one. Trees, a big setback from the creek with a lot of landscape trees. The two-story downsplit homes versus the single-story homes. Again, notice the big setback from Windsor Drive here versus here. And again, just the elimination of the homes, huge. And part of the elimination, we also have preserved an additional 110 trees with this change, a significant reduction in tree removal. And as we fly closer here, you'll see that on the previous plan, we had the barn being relocated. And now we have, the trail system that Maggie will go into a little deeper, but now we have the tot lot and staging area for the creek, the parking lot. And then we'll zoom back around here. You'll kind of see the overall view from this angle here. And again, you'll see the difference, huge difference in obviously the elimination of those homes, but just even what we're proposing, much smaller footprint all the way around. So again, all that was part of the listening to the community, listen to you, and obviously Greg had this vision to make this happen. So with that said, we'll end up there on the barns, then I'll go ahead and stop sharing and I'll turn it over to Maggie Jensen.
Thank you, Steve. Those were some really informative graphics. Let's see, I'm just sharing my screen here. Hopefully you all can see that. Great. So my name is Maggie Jensen, and I'm a landscape architect with PCI in Sebastopol. And I've had the pleasure of working on the park design with Kelly Creek Protection Partners for the past 6 years. And we've been working collaboratively with Sonoma County Regional Parks, who would ultimately implement and maintain this park as an extension of Putnam. This is a macro view here of the park. The orientation of the extension lies to the east of Putnam, shown in this red rectangle here, and will be accessed by both D Street and Windsor Drive. The proposed extension is 44 acres and will connect to Putnam by a trail located, the connection point will be located where this red star is shown, with a project goal of improved recreational access to Putnam. We'll zoom into the park plan next, but the general trail alignment that will connect these two pieces of property will run north of Kelly Creek, connecting to a new trail on the regional park side. So that will be the main connector. Okay, we're gonna move to the next slide. One important point is much of the park will be left grazed by livestock, allowing the pastoral views of these red barns and grassy hills to be maintained and serve as a gateway to the city of Petaluma. This zoomed in view of the park has three main access points, excuse me. We've previously reviewed this small upper lot on Windsor, which has room for 10 spaces. There's a larger lot down here on D Street, which has room for 27 cars. And there's an existing driveway here at the Red Barns that will be used primarily for buses, service vehicles, and emergency vehicle access. In terms of pedestrian and bicycle access, there's a proposed Class 1 trail that runs north-south along D Street here. It sweeps into the park and then back out along D Street for bicycles and pedestrians. And then there's also a sidewalk along Windsor Drive here with crosswalks shown for safe access to the park. And importantly, Kelly Creek runs west to east through the center of the park site. The first phase of the park design will be the lower 27 space lot, the footbridge to the barn center, which is shown here, and also on the lower left, there's an inset of what that would look like in elevation. And then the connector trail to Putnam here, which lies north of Kelly Creek. That would be phase 1 implementation. This is a proposed phased park improvements. In addition to public access and restoration, a very important part of this design is habitat restoration of Kelly Creek and its tributaries and the pasture land. We'll touch more in detail on that after we go through a walk in the park. So, see, get my cursor here. So we're gonna arrive at the lower parking lot. What you'll find here, you'll find interpretive signage and maps, amenities such as drinking fountains, dog bags, trash, recycling, all of your standard park elements that help people get ready for their walk, their hike. As we move through to the north, we walk through this it's one of my favorite pieces of the property. It's a historic alley of cypress trees that would be cleaned up, and that path cuts through there. There's a playground and a small picnic area, natural playground with a beautiful backdrop of, this is the D Street tributary that feeds into Kelly Creek. A restroom, this would be a proposed restroom location. And around the picnic area, we have planned for butterfly gardens, lots of milkweeds for the monarch, and some buckwheat and other fun things. Then you go over Kelly Creek. This pedestrian footbridge is like walking through the treetops, and you get great views of the creek, proposed interpretive signage on the creek about the health of our watersheds, and you know, the reason their site is so rich with natural resources, it opens up the doorway for lots of great environmental education opportunities. Once you get over the pedestrian footbridge, you get into the barn center, which is really the heart of the park here. With the intention of the 3 red barns to be restored and serve as interpretive elements, educating park users about the site's rich agricultural history. There's a proposed ag museum that Greg had shown in his video for farm equipment. And then there's the old milking barn, which could be an interpretive feature once restored. And then this 3rd barn over here is designated for offices, park offices and service vehicle parking. Other amenities in the barn center include an outdoor amphitheater for learning, a small livestock corral to get up close with the farm animals for kids to learn and see, and then veggie gardens and bike parking. Then we head out onto the North Trail. And this would be a multi-use trail with interpretive signage about the creek. It extends for approximately a ½ mile before connecting up to Helen Putnam. And should you not want to take too long of a hike, you have the option to cross over the creek onto the southern trail here. Walking through the pasture with the cows, similar to what one might do at Taylor Mountain. After walking through the pasture, we get to a larger group picnic area with stunning views and another footbridge that goes back into the barn center, completing that walk. So habitat restoration for this project is a key element, and restoration and enhancement, I should say. We're planning to exclude cattle from the creek with fencing, which will allow that understory vegetation to reestablish. And we're also going to exclude cattle from, I think you saw a very attractive stock pond that was a big muddy mess. And so that we can get some native plants and understory species going in there for the benefit of all the wildlife on the property. Trees, oaks, buckeyes, bays, shrubs, sedges, rush, a whole suite of natives. This, I think you saw in the aerial, there's a pretty massive gully that's kind of ripping up into the hillside here, dumping a lot of sediment into Gully Creek. And we would exclude cattle from that as well. Repair the head cuts with rock structure, plant it. So that would be a big benefit as well. And then fencing improvements. Cattle would not be drinking directly from the creek and the stock ponds. We would put water troughs out, which would help increase pasture production. So lots of benefits to this park in addition to public access. What I love about this project is that it's so rich with environmental education opportunities, including educating park users about the rich agricultural history of Petaluma. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Peter Cohn. Thank you. Stop share. Okay.
Peter, please unmute.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you to all the panelists for excellent presentations. I'm going to just conclude with some brief closing remarks before we have the Q&A. And I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Kelly Creek Protection Project. And the reflections would be as follows. As a 5-year-old, I grew up with a single mom, 4 older sisters, and a brother on aid to families with dependent children in the urban core of Long Beach. Due to my wise mom, I had the invaluable experience of walking with my siblings the 10 blocks to our local MacArthur Park, a 1 square block park that at the time I thought was huge. But that small park with its caring staff was an oasis in our lives. that instilled in us not only the power of parks in people's lives, but also the value of careers in public service. I've had the honor of returning those life's favors through church work, social work, community mental health, and NAACP civil rights work. It was my legal work at the NAACP that ultimately connected me to another public interest lawyer here in Petaluma, Greg Colvin. I saw the value of parks and outdoors to advance health and well-being for all individuals, especially in this time of a global pandemic. We see the signs and deeds across Petaluma welcoming all people, affirming that Black, Latino, and immigrant lives matter. We have also seen this generosity of spirit in our fellow residents who saw the clear benefits of this settlement and came forward to financially support Kelly Creek Protection Project's $5.1 million parkland gift to Sonoma County Regional Parks. Donations from over 230 family leaders were in the range of $10 to $10,000. The kind notes of support for KCPP that accompanied those donations were very touching. And why did they do it? Petalumans wanted to be a part of an amazing KCPP, philanthropic, Petaluma City, Sonoma County, Ag and Open Space District, and Regional Parks partnership that ultimately, and so fortunately, included Steve and Davidon homes. Moreover, our supporters did it to preserve and gift as much of the Scott Ranch as possible to Sonoma County Regional Parks to return the very favors that some of us had received as children to all the students and their families, and especially those underserved families, families of color who might not have easy access to the parks and the outdoors in Petaluma and Sonoma County. This generous gift will provide a scenic downtown portal to Putnam Park for the disabled, children's, families, walkers, and bikers from the entire community, east side and west side. No one should ever suggest to our community that in working together, Petalumans cannot find common ground on land development controversies, because if the city approves the park and residential plans here, Petalumans together will have effectively preserved forever 84% of the entire 58-acre ranch for parkland and open space. This is an historic achievement, a win-win for all. And along with my fellow panelists, I'd like to say thank you for joining in this meeting, and we look forward to receiving and responding to your further questions.
Well, thank you, Peter, and to all the presenters tonight. And with the little over 30 minutes that we have left, I'd like to turn to the questions that have come in, and appreciate all of you posting questions. And I apologize, I did not state early on, and I want to reiterate that this meeting tonight is not part of the city's formal California Environmental Quality Act review process. This is an informational meeting. And for folks who want to submit formal comments, you need to go through the official City of Petaluma process, and we'll provide some links at the last slide here when we wrap up. So again, just to reiterate, this is not part of the CEQA process. And tonight's presentation and full discussion is being recorded, and the link to this recording will be made available as soon as it can be loaded onto the Extend Putnam Park website. So we'll get to that when the meeting's wrapped up, but let's turn to the questions now. And I appreciate those of you who have used the upvoting process to identify the questions that are shared by many of you. And so we'll start with those, and we'll get down the list here as far as we can in the time we have remaining. A number of the questions that seem to have received the greatest number of votes are around the homes. And Steve was going to speak to a number of these around what is the price range of the 28 homes, and what could happen if this project doesn't get permitted and go forward. Is there a possibility of building fewer homes? I'm sort of listing a number of these related questions, and I think Steve can address them, and then we'll go from there. So maybe Steve, can I turn it to you to speak to the first few questions?
Sure. Yeah, the first one obviously is always the most popular question as far as the cost of the homes. That's always based on the market value at the time the homes are being sold. So, if you were to look at today's market price and compare it to what's being sold in Victoria, I think it'd be just under $1 million to just over probably up to 1.3, 1.4 range. But obviously, we're still a couple of years out before houses would go for sale, but that's kind of a range to consider. As far as the number of homes, it is, as I mentioned, in the city's general plan and the zoning, that there's a density that's been approved through the process of the general plan. And the city has designated that there is a minimum of 28 homes to a maximum of 110 homes that are allowed, legally allowed for us to build on this property. So there will be a minimum of 28 homes built on this property. If Davidon, well, if this doesn't pass, I don't, well, we're not even thinking about that right now. We want to get this thing proved. I think this is the best foot that can be put forward for the community. It's got so many community benefits with what Greg and Kelly Creek Protection Project is putting forward here with this expansion of the park. It's a phenomenal benefit for the community, and this one should, I'm hoping, get passed. So.
Greg, maybe I could turn to you. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, and specifically there's some questions about the city mandating a minimum of 28 homes. Anything you can add there?
Well, sure. The mandate is not that Davidon must build 28 homes, a minimum of 28 homes. The mandate is this, that if the property is zoned, and there has been a mistake made in some information that's come out in the community, it is designated very light residential R1. The general plan has superseded the original zoning of this property as ag and open space. So when it's designated by the city as residential, it means the owner acquires certain rights. And when Arnold Scott owned it, that meant that his gift to the University of Pacific was valuable because the land could be built with residential homes somewhere between 28 and 110. So it's not so much that the city, forces homes to be built here. It's that the residential designation for the whole road, the whole valley along Windsor, has allowed a range of density of homes to be built, and those who own the property can expect that the city would at least approve the minimum number provided for in the zoning designation.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to a couple of the other questions. And of course, any of the other panelists, if you want to add in, please do. An anonymous attendee asks, how would fire hazard be mitigated? These homes would be prime firewood, in their opinion.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Greg, and you can jump in here. But as you'll see in the if you haven't read the EIR, but there has been an extensive amount of study in regard to the fire analysis of this project. There's been a fuel management plan created that will basically in perpetuity maintain the fuel around this property. There's steps that it's a bullet point, step by step, of what needs to be done and how this property is to be managed. And this is going to be monitored and managed very, very well by the HOA, by the Parks District. And in addition to that, the homes will be actually built with fire-resistant materials. So with the fire-resistant materials and this fuel management plan that's going to be implemented, this property will be actually probably safer. They're saying it will be safer than it exists today.
Okay. Another question asking if Davidon or anyone affiliated with the home company has paid any money or made contributions to city council or city planning members.
We have not. No contributions.
Okay. Well, another question about, same question about the home prices. You've already addressed that. So let's move down. Some more detailed questions. Will the park and the amphitheater area only be available for use by the residents of the new development?
I'll take that one. No, they'll be available to the general public.
Yeah, I guess there was another development that was built that sort of, that was what was said and didn't actually play out with some signs that were put in later that saying only residents could use the park facilities. So obviously some fear about that, but I think you've made it pretty clear that no, they would be open, right? So there's a question here about the urban growth boundary and if we could show that on the map. I didn't see that clearly articulated on the map. Is that something you can speak about?
I can probably share my screen real quick.
Sure.
So the urban, so this, sorry about that. This line here, can you see this? This line here is actually the city boundary. Our property is on the city boundary. So the urban growth boundary line, setback line is a 300-foot setback here. So again, city limits, the urban limit line, and then there's a 300-foot setback that basically runs along this line here, if you guys can see that. Hope that's clear.
Steve, I've been pointed out that we didn't really address the question about what could happen if Davidon doesn't pass. So I guess the question's getting at, what if this project doesn't receive entitlements? What happens to the property, if I'm understanding correctly?
Go ahead, Greg.
Sure. Austin, I've been making a list because a neighbor of mine asked me that question several weeks ago, and it really caused me to think about how to be able to list and describe what's at stake here. And the last two of my slides do cover some of those main points. I don't know if you can bring that up, Austin.
Sure, if you give me one sec.
I'm just going to talk through what some of them are, and you can put it up when you can. The extension of Putnam Park is not a given. We first have to acquire that property at Kelly Creek Protection Project and then transfer it to Sonoma County Regional Park. So it really is available to everyone, not like an HOA park that's only available to residents. And so that's the first thing that's at stake, to be able to get that extension. We've had tremendously good relationships with the planning department at Sonoma County Regional Park. So the proximity already between the ranch and Putnam Park make it a natural. But just because more and more open space has been protected with every time we've returned to the Scott Ranch over the last 15 years, doesn't mean it would become part of Putnam Park. It could be, as it is in Marin and a number of other areas that are close to regional or county parks or city parks, just a sort of private trail that people can use, but the land is not professionally managed by regional parks. And regional parks has huge professional experience with endangered species, with fire protection, and with that parking issue, which I know is going to come up. So here are 8 issues right now. These are things that you wouldn't have if this doesn't go through. We're not going to resolve the parking issues on Windsor, which any given day has 25 to 50 or more people parking on the street because there are no parking lots connected to this side of Helen Putnam Park. The roundabout at Windsor and D Street will raise the level of service from an F to a B as measured by one of the traffic measurements. We need safe crosswalks and continuous sidewalks down D Street in order for the fact that this is within a 20-minute walk from the post office to make it possible to not have to drive to Putnam Park, but safely walk up from many parts of the west side of Petaluma. The rehabilitation of the historic Red Barns with the Farm and Nature Education Center, that's not going to happen unless this plan goes through and it becomes part of Putnam Park. Same for the trails, restrooms, playground, picnic area, and the California red-legged frog habitat. It needs to be protected and remediated. It can't just sit there without some very conscious, and Maggie is an expert in this. Our acquisition of this park, every square inch that we can, will be to protect the red-legged frog. Improvements to the watershed. You know, there are people who live downstream who have noticed how much the water flow from the Victoria development has increased and worsened in quality. And we have 3 infiltration basements that will take not only the runoff from the houses that Davidon might build, but also the parking lots, and the existing part of Windsor that right now is impervious and creates additional water that runs right into Kelly Creek. We're going to take that water off of Windsor Drive and put it in a nice infiltration and maybe reflecting pond near the Red Barns. Now let's talk about money. There's $4 million sitting in escrow. That's going to go for naught if we're not able to use it to purchase these 44 acres. Let's go to the next slide. There is also, we were fortunate to get a $1 million ag and open space matching grant. It expires in October of this year. Perhaps we can get it renewed, but we really have a $5 million which available, which in addition to donations of several tens of thousands from our donor supporters, that can be used to build out the trails and the parking lots. And I know that when the property becomes part of Putnam Park, they are geniuses in generating matching funds, as they have already for the existing Putnam Park, to build out those amenities. So I think I'll just stop there. We've already talked about fire protection and the amount of open space. I would just say this is our chance to secure the future and leave a legacy for generations to come. It's really about outcomes.
Thanks, Greg. Let's go on to some of the other questions here. Question about the sidewalks. Maybe this is for Maggie. There's currently no sidewalk that provides a safe walk up Windsor below B Street. Will that change?
Do you want me to take that one, Maggie?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so there is part of the project. We will be extending the sidewalk from Windsor Drive on the, I guess it'd be the east side of D Street all the way down, connecting to the existing concrete city sidewalk. So yeah, that connection will be made with this project.
Okay. A question about the barns. Were the barns to be slightly relocated in the current plan?
No, the barns stay in place in their existing location.
Okay. A little bit of interest in the history around those barns, and some curiosity around a woman that ran it for a number of years. And there's maybe some possibilities from interpretive stations or something at the barns there. Has that been considered at this time?
Yeah, we're definitely hoping that these barns end up getting restored, and absolutely interpretive elements about the historic agricultural use are going to be a highlight of the park. That's the hope.
Greg.
Greg, you're muted. Oh.
No, I want to say one more thing about the barns. There is in the package of things that we have coming before the city a slight change to the matter of the location of the barns. It could be that the barns are going to need to be raised up. Right now, they're just sitting rotting on pier blocks. And in order to protect from the erosion of Kelly Creek and the general deterioration of the barns, it might be necessary to lift them up and during the rehabilitation. When they are set back down, it could be that they'll have to be moved a few feet further out from the creek to have the best long-term foundation. So in a minor way, there could be a slight movement for the barns.
Okay, makes sense. And maybe this is a question for Maggie about the trails and where they specifically connect with existing trails. And I know you highlighted that in your presentation, but might have been hard to see with the small mouse moving a cursor moving around. Could you expand on that a little bit? And if you need to, you're on mute. You could share the screen if there's a relevant image that you want to.
There we go. Yeah, let me try that. Hold on one second. So.
While you're doing that, I appreciate a couple people clarified there was a little typo. They said the connections to the trains, and someone's pointed out there's no trains. They meant trails. So.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah, it's up. Looks good.
Okay, great. So obviously these trails are not existing trails. If you can see my cursor, this is Putnam Park to the west here. And regional parks would construct a new trail that does not currently exist that would lead to this point right here at the property line. And this trail is a proposed trail. That's our connector trail that runs north of Kelly Creek. That's a multi-use trail. So that's where the connection between the current Scott Ranch and Putnam Park would be right here. I don't know if that answers the question fully.
Can you speak to what happens to the extension of the park? Does Sonoma Regional Parks take ownership of the additional space, or how is that managed in the long run?
Well, ultimately, the plan is that Sonoma County Regional Parks will both implement and maintain this park, and it will be run as a county park. Greg, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, the same thing happened at the other end of the park near West Haven. When West Haven was built, the Golden Gate Land Conservancy had that land where there's now a new trail in separate ownership, and it's been conveyed now to Sonoma County Regional Parks. Same is true for what would happen here. It would be fully conveyed with conservation easements and so on to Sonoma County Regional Park. It will be, this is our goal, to be in public ownership in perpetuity. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is pertinent to our EIR, we don't have the map right here, but part of the EIR that's before the city includes the connecting trail that would go from the west edge of the Scott Ranch, where the footbridge is, into and then switch back up through the trees to connect with the existing Oxford Court Trail. And actually that submission to the city of the trail connection has been on the table ever since Davidon made its last proposal in 2017. So a lot of thought has already gone into that connection. And we want people to be able to get into all of Putnam Park from this new trailhead and be able to park in the new parking lot and not have to park on Windsor just to be able to get there to walk.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good to leave this image up as we talk through a couple of these questions. There were some questions around parking, and specifically, would there be charges for parking, and is there a possibility of reducing the cost of parking at Putnam? Could you elaborate a little bit on the parking lot and some of the uses there?
Sure. Well, right now there's only one official parking lot for Putnam Park, and that's off of Chileno Valley Road in the back. And there are a lot of people who use that. It's actually the gentlest slope of trail into the park. The others are much steeper. But they do require a 2-mile drive around to get to them. And there are plenty of people who use them who either pay the $7 a day or they have an annual pass. The annual pass for somebody like me who's a senior is $49, $69 for people who are younger. These passes will let you into all of the county parks and beaches every day of the year for the period of time that you buy the annual pass. They're also disabled and low income passes. And one of the things Peter and I have been working on is to try to subsidize even the low income pass for the less financially able members of our community, the families that need outdoor recreation, but don't belong to an expensive club and could come here for $5 a year or even for free, either walking or driving, and be able to park. And I'm totally sympathetic to the issue of what it means to have fee-based parking, but it is a Sonoma County Regional Parks policy that they follow even with those parks that are located close to a town. We have had other ideas, such as trying to get corporate sponsors to sponsor a parking spot and give them a little plaque and say that you can park for free here, courtesy of filling your favorite company for the next year. So far, what I think we're going to try to do is to see, because of the attractiveness of the location of the parking lots on the Scott Ranch, that people who already have parking passes but are parking on Windsor because that's the only way to get in, will park in those parking lots. That'll reduce the pressure. And that for many others who may need to pay $69 or $49 for an annual pass, they would see that not unlike their KQED contribution to a valuable free public service. So it's a big topic, but there's no question we're going to improve things by having 2 new parking lots with 37 spaces that were not there before.
Right. Would people still be allowed to park on Windsor or D streets?
It's very hard to tell people they can't park on a public street. And that's a city issue, but you know, it's really a question in my mind of spreading out the parking lot, the parking issue, so that there's not so much concentration right now in that one Oxford Court entrance, where actually before Victoria was even built, there was a little triangle right below the Oxford Court Trail, right by my friend Che's house. There was supposed to be a parking lot, and it never got developed. And I don't know whether it would have been good or bad to have a parking lot there, but there is none until we build it.
Right.
In Austin?
Yes, please.
In addition to our outreach in terms of low-income families across the city and throughout the county, in terms of them having access to the 56 plus Sonoma County regional parks and beaches, we're very conscious, for example, that the disabled on the downtown side of Putnam Park really have very difficult, limited access to the park. The state-of-the-art park that Maggie and Steve have been describing includes Davidon putting in water utilities. Bert Whitaker at one point told me that for the most part, our Sonoma County regional parks have outhouses. We will have restrooms for the disabled and for all the people with running water. And so it'll really be a fine state-of-the-art addition to not only the city of Petaluma, but to Sonoma County as well.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. There was a question about, is Davidon paying for these amenities that are being added to the park? And you just said that they would be paying for the restrooms. Is that true of the other features that are proposed here in the park area?
there are certain features that Davidon has agreed to pay for, but as an example, the very valuable water infiltration basins, the sidewalks that will go around the park, and the traffic circle. There are certain items that Davidon has agreed to pay for, and then the others would come as a part of the park development itself, and those would be done in concert with some of the funding that the public has provided, but ultimately it'll be managed, as Maggie mentioned, by Sonoma County Regional Parks. Our activity is all around securing the property and handing it over to Sonoma County Regional Parks to massively expand Helen Putnam Park.
Okay. Well, we got a couple minutes left here. I want to make sure that we've addressed as many of the questions as possible. So thanks for everyone hanging in there with us. There's a question around traffic warnings and sort of traffic mitigation on D Street, especially as you approach the circle. This person's commenting that cars often go flying past Windsor down D Street towards downtown. Anyone have any clarifications, or how would traffic be sort of mitigated there, and what are included in the design here to help manage the increased traffic that might result?
Yeah, so yeah, that traffic circle obviously still needs to go through some final design, but absolutely there'll be some flashing warning beacons that are going to be required, that are required through the mitigation measures in the EIR. There'll be advanced signage, all that necessary safety precautions before you arrive to that roundabout. Absolutely.
Great. Question about horse use and in the expansion of the park, and has there been any thought to the types of uses that would be allowed in this addition to the Helen Putnam?
Well, the trails are multi-use. We currently don't have designated equestrian parking on our plan. There is equestrian over at Helen Putnam, so they're multi-use. My understanding is horse riding is not, it would be allowed, but that would ultimately be a decision of how regional parks wanted to manage the space.
Okay.
We do expect that there'll be plenty of bicycle access. There already is in all other parks at Clark, and so in fact, the new West Wind Trail is a favorite with mountain bikers, and the trails will be wide enough, right, Maggie, to make sure that we don't have collisions.
Yeah. The trail along the north side of the creek is a proposed 10-foot wide trail, so it's a nice width for those multiple uses.
Yeah. Maybe this is a question for Steve, clarifying that this person noticed that there's a proposal to have no parking in the proposed development. If that is the case, will the city be willing to implement no parking in the surrounding neighborhood?
There's, I think there's a requirement for parking for residential projects. So each size home, whether dependent on how many bedrooms you have and such, there's a certain amount of parking that is required. So absolutely, there is parking, adequate parking within our subdivision. Yeah.
And Steve, while I've got your attention, a design question about how will the hillside of the homes backing up to Oxford Circle be graded? Will the roof lines of the new homes be below the height of the Oxford Circle homes?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the exact height of how far below their backyard pads or level ground is. It's significant though, as you saw in some of those three-dimensional views that I showed. But what I do know is that from what we had before the 66 lot plan, this new plan has actually lowered the roof line by 17 feet. So it's significant. So absolutely, those Oxford homes their spectacular views will not be hindered whatsoever from this development.
Okay. And last two questions I want to hit before we wrap up. who will pay for the barn and park building maintenance? Is that the parks, county parks in the long run, or?
Greg?
For maintenance?
I think there's somebody listening right now. I just got a text from him, Bert Whitaker, who's the head of regional parks. He says, we love horses. Just to correct
Good.
any misunderstanding
Bert.
about that. But we're going to transition to Sonoma County Regional Parks on the rehabilitation and the protection of the barns. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot to rehabilitate, especially the big barn, put a new foundation on it, and give it structural reinforcement. The roof right now, we paid $17,000 2 years ago to have a Henrys roofing put on some temporary roofing to keep it from leaking. That's started to blow off a bit, but yeah, what we're going to do is get started on the phase 1 improvements to the park, and then work with regional parks to do what they do so well in using county resources to fulfill the dream for what this park can be.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I want to respect everyone's evening here, and it is 7 o'clock right now, and that is what we were scheduled to go to. So I want to turn our attention to some closing remarks and what will happen going forward here. So clearly there was a couple questions, ones that just came in last minute that we're not going to be able to spend more time tonight, but I am told that that these questions will be reviewed and some additional responses will be prepared and posted to the website, the extendputnampark.org. I've just posted these into the chat box. So you've got the website there, as well as the link to the City of Petaluma Scott Ranch. And this is the site that you should go to if you have specific comments that you want to be considered in part of the environmental review that the city's doing. And then, of course, if you have any additional questions or want more info, you're welcome to email directly to the info@extendputnampark.org site. That is there. And then the city is, as you've heard, is doing a deep review on this and full compliance with the California Environmental Quality Acts, and comments are due by Monday, March 8th, and that appears to have been extended. And then the city council hearing is set for Monday, March 15th. So those are dates and opportunities for those that want to further engage with this project. Again, the video recording from tonight, as well as the presentation and the video that you saw earlier in the presentation, those will all be available on the extendputnampark.org website as quick as possible, as well as some further clarifications to questions that were asked tonight. With that, I want to thank you all for coming out and raising questions and helping make this information sharing session productive. So much appreciation, and I wish you all well and safety going forward here. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll close out for tonight. So thank you all and have a good evening.